you are not God. And you cannot assume his powers because you don't have them. You may convince yourself you have them. You may want them. You may have been promised them. But in the end, they're not yours and you'll never have them. They're not yours and you'll never have them. They're not yours and you'll never have them. Millions of American Christians voted for Donald Trump when he ran for president in the last election, and millions more Christians around the world rooted for him to win. Many still do root for Donald Trump. Now, why is that? Because of his personal piety? Well, of course not. Trump, to his credit, has never claimed to be personally pious, especially religious in any sense. They voted for him and they still support him because he seemed like a protector. He seemed like someone who might save them from the growing and highly aggressive agnosticism, if not atheism, of, say, the technology class or the bureaucratic class, godless nations of other religions that oppose us. Donald Trump seemed like someone who would protect Christians from that, who was committed to the free exercise of religion in this country and who was also committed to ending abortion. Whether or not he himself opposed abortion, whether he was pro-life in any meaningful sense, didn't seem to matter. He would appoint justices that opposed abortion, that thought Roe v. Wade was unconstitutional. He did that. And that he would basically carry the flag for their issues, and that he was sympathetic to them. And they support him on that basis. Can they still support him? That's the question. And that's a question Christians should have begun to ask themselves on January 4th of this year. And that was the day that the president announced the arrest of the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, who was, no question, an anti-American leader and a socialist, not someone most Americans liked or really had cause to like. So the problem is not necessarily that Trump was against an anti-American leader. In fact, that was a benefit in the eyes of most of his voters. The problem was why we did it and why the president told us he did it, and that was for the oil. So in the days before that operation in early January, the president tweeted out, sent out on his Truth Social account, and also said in public, we're doing this because we want the oil, because that oil belongs to the United States. He never explained how exactly the United States would own the natural resources of a foreign country. Apparently, American oil companies helped develop the oil fields in Venezuela, therefore we own the oil. That was the idea, and they stole it from us. But there was no real effort to explain how that works, how that makes any sense at all. Instead, you had the President of the United States say, we need the oil. Oil's really important. True and true. Therefore, we're going to take it. And therefore, apparently we did. In the days after that operation, the successful removal of the president of the country and the installation of his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, as president, our president, Donald Trump, held a widely publicized on-camera meeting with the heads of American oil companies and talked through how we're going to split up the natural resources of Venezuela and why this is great for America. So why should Christians have paused at exactly that moment and asked, can I still support this? Is this what I voted for? Is this what I want? Is this acceptable? And the reason is really simple, because Trump at that moment revealed that the motive was taking something that we wanted. And that's not acceptable for Christians. In fact, that's not acceptable for Americans or any civilized people, because taking other people's stuff by force cannot be allowed. In fact, preventing that is the basis of our legal code. If there's one thing that every person knows, that is, in a civilized country, you can't steal without penalty. It's not allowed. That doesn't belong to you. You can't shoplift. You can't rob banks. You can't embezzle. You can't invade countries to steal their stuff, because they're all varieties of the same theme, which is theft. And theft is wrong. It's wrong under the American legal code, but it's also wrong under the Christian legal code. Theft is wrong. It's spelled out really clearly. It's also intuitive. And here was the president saying, we're just stealing this because we can. Well, as a practical matter, that's quite a thing to say out loud, given that we know from history that the things you do will be done unto you. Once you set a standard, you will have to live by that standard. Write a law, you will be judged by that law. So if the new law is I can take it because I want it, and I have more power than you, at some point, we can rest assured the tables will be turned, and the things that we want and cherish and have earned and that we own will be taken from us by force at the moment when some other power has more force than we do. It's really simple, sometimes called the law of the jungle. And it may be the law of nature, but people don't want to live under that law because it is a brutal and unforgiving law. So they create higher laws, or they appeal to the highest law of all, which is God's law, which prohibits that. So this was a profound moment in American history, probably in the history of the modern world, where the most powerful nation said, if we want it, we'll take it. No one's ever said that before. Now, they've done it under the guise of ideology. They've made up stories to hide the fact they're doing it. But to say you're doing it implicates everybody else in the crime. You can't say you didn't know. Your president just told you on television, we took out their president because we want his oil. And at that point, you're an accessory to the crime, whether you want to be or not. And it's at that point that a lot of people should have spoken up and said, I'm out. Not that I hate Trump or don't like his entire program. Lots of things about it I love. I'm grateful. I'd maybe vote for him again, but I can't support theft because it's immoral. But they didn't. Maybe some did, but certainly the leaders of the American Christian churches, by and large, said absolutely nothing. And maybe because they said nothing, this accelerated. These are the same people who sort of didn't notice somehow that on Inauguration Day, the president did not take his oath of office with his hand on the Bible.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
His wife stood next to him holding it. I was about 15 feet away and saw it, but he did not put his hand on the Bible. And that should have been maybe a clue that we need to pause and think about, what is this? Why wouldn't you put your hand on the Bible? If you don't believe in the Bible, you think it's just a book, there's no cost to you to putting your hand on it, just kind of following the protocol, going along with the tradition. All presidents do it. Why aren't you doing it? And you're not doing it intentionally. You're choosing not to put your hand on the Bible when you take that oath. That suggests not that you don't believe it's real, because if you didn't believe it was real, why would you care? You'd put on the costume and take it off. It doesn't matter. That suggests you know it is real and you're rejecting it intentionally. You know what you're doing and you're doing it anyway. But nobody asked questions about that either. It seemed kind of inappropriate, given the celebration then in progress, to ask, why wouldn't you put your hand on the Bible when you take the oath of office to lead our nation? But pretty much nobody did. I didn't. I'll admit that. I saw it and didn't say one word. Bothered me ever since. But right around January 4th, it became clear that maybe he didn't put his hand on the Bible because he affirmatively rejects what's inside that book. And what's inside that book are limits on human behavior. Because if there's one theme that spans all 66 books in the Christian Bible, it's that you are not God. And you cannot assume his powers. Because you don't have them. You may convince yourself you have them. You may want them. You may have been promised them. But in the end, they're not yours. And you'll never have them. And you can only destroy yourself and the people around you by pretending that you do. That is the consistent message that spans from Genesis to Revelation. And people who ignore that law are punished. Just like people who ignore gravity or freezing temperatures are punished. Because these are laws that were not created by people. They supersede people. But on January 4th, when the President of the United States told us he was stealing, that our country was stealing something that didn't belong to us, people should have piped up and said something, but they didn't. And that got us all the way to yesterday, which was Easter Sunday. Easter Sunday is not just a holy day on the Christian calendar, it is the center of the Christian calendar. It is the holiest day in Christian life. Because it's the day that Christians remember the whole point of their religion, which is not that Jesus was killed, but that he rose from the dead, that he beat death, unique in history. And this is the day that Christians celebrate his resurrection. And in this country, that celebration's been watered down effectively to candy and Easter bunnies, but globally and certainly historically, Easter is the focus. It's preceded by Holy Week and Lent, 40 days of self-denial and prayer, all leading up to yesterday, Easter morning. And for faithful Christians, it is still the biggest day of the year. And it's a day of joy. The thing every person fears most is death. We're born fearing it because we're born knowing it's coming. And Christianity, unique among religions, promises victory over it. And Jesus' resurrection is proof that God can beat death because only God creates life. And so the morning of Easter is a uniquely joyful and peaceful moment. And yet that peace yesterday was shattered. That's not an overstatement. It was shattered for many observant Christians by a statement that the President of the United States put out at 8:03 a.m. Eastern Time on Easter morning that said this, and we're going to read it in its entirety, not in outrage or self-righteousness, but honestly in horror. Quote, "Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. 3 exclamation points. Open the straight, you crazy tabs, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. All caps. Praise be to Allah. President Donald J. Trump." Now, a lot of people reading that imagined, of course, this can't be real. Did the President of the United States really just write that? And it is real. It is maybe the most real thing this president has ever done, and also the most revealing. On every level, it is vile. On every level. It begins with a promise to use the U.S. military, our military, to destroy civilian infrastructure in another country, which is to say to commit a war crime, a moral crime against the people of the country, whose welfare, by the way, was one of the reasons we supposedly went into this war in the first place.
Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach.
We are tracking breaking news right now on the war in Iran and that looming deadline. This morning, President Trump is ramping up threats to launch a, quote, a massive attack if Tehran cannot forge a deal to open the Strait of Hormuz by 5 p.m. The president posting on social media minutes ago, quote, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will," end quote. Iran's leaders responded to Trump's other threats overnight, saying if more attacks are carried out, the U.S. will be blocked from getting oil and gas for years. Iran's president says more than 14 million Iranians have declared their readiness to give their lives to defend the country. An Iranian minister has called for young people to form human chains around the country's power plants ahead of the deadline. Experts warn what Trump is threatening could be considered a war crime if civilian infrastructure is hit.
They're being killed by their government. We have to rescue them. And now here's our president, not even a month and a half into the conflict, which we are not winning, by the way, because the Straits of Hormuz are not open. There's one way to keep track. That's the measurement. Saying that we're going to use our military to kill the civilians of this country who didn't choose the war. They got nothing to do with it. They're like civilians everywhere. Blow up their bridges? Bridges on military bases? No, just bridges. Bridges that people cross every day to go to school and work and to worship, and yes, church, because there are over 1 million Christians in Iran. This is their Easter too. And power plants. Not the power plants attached to missile factories, okay, but civilian power plants in a country of almost 100 million people. What happens when a modern country, and a country that has a nuclear program is a modern country, sorry, Iran is a modern country, what happens when it loses power? Well, people die.
We're gonna make history. We're gonna change how everything is gonna look, and we're gonna do it right.
From the Jordan River to the Middle East, that's all ours. It was promised to us. There's no Palestinian nation. No one wants them, so why we? Because we are good. We finished to be good 3 weeks ago.
I think the bombing is good. I think they should have a lot more of the bombing, the bombarding. I think we can do a lot more inside of Gaza. It's a fight between the good and the bad, the good and the evil.
The only innocent people that are in Gaza now are the 229 hostages that were taken. Once they will go back to Israel, we will bomb Shifa Hospital, all the hospitals, all the tunnels, and kill them all.
The worst single mass killing of Palestinians in the Israel-Gaza war so far. Hundreds are dead after a blast at a hospital. Chaos and horror at the scene. Much of the building has been destroyed. A panic to treat the injured. Thousands of people were sheltering at the hospital, having fled Israel's bombing campaign targeting Hamas. They thought they were safe. Now Gazans once again count the cost of this war.
Israel denies it was responsible, blaming Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Jordan, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia condemn what they say was an Israeli attack.
In terms of the warnings that you got, could you tell us what form of warnings? Were they written warnings, telephone calls, and how many of them were there ahead of this?
We have, since the decision we made about evacuation of North Gaza to the south of Gaza, we have received 3 warnings. So beginning, I think, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So these 3 were many by telephone. They would phone the administration, telling them as much as they did because they have the phone numbers of all the directors of the hospital, so they can they either send message or whatever means they have to notify. So these are the 3 warnings that there were.
So you received, not only do you receive 3 warnings after the first strike to your church, saying that the hospital would be bombed. What did the warning say?
The warning that the hospital will be bombed. Let's be clear. The warnings, they were to evacuate the hospital.
To evacuate the hospital.
Yes, that was the warning.
But the warning was that otherwise, sorry to be clarified, that was implicit in that was the idea that the hospital would be bombed because you had to evacuate it. They said you say you would evacuate the hospital.
The connection you make, what happened on the facts on the ground. 3 days before the actual bombing, the hospital was hit in the 2 floors that I mentioned. And then we continued to receive the notices to evacuate, and then the hospital was struck last night. So these are the facts on the ground that actually happened.
Given that the facts as you have set them out to us here in this room, the Israeli denies that they are involved in the bombing and that it was an Israeli missile. We must accept that they are worthless, they are baseless, those Israeli denials, given they sent you 3 warnings to evacuate the hospital. Do you agree with that analysis?
People can analyze what they want to analyze. Again, from our point of view, we as a church, we continue to say that, the place, the hospital itself is a sanctuary for people, and what happened there is a crime. We are not, again, military people to decide, or we are not journalists to analyze. We are not politicians to decide. What we are saying here is that, what has happened in the hospital is a crime, is a massacre.
This haphazard policy and contradictions coming out of this White House are staggering. Everything they say feels like it was kind of made up on the spot and not coordinated in any way to justify whatever they did, not just yesterday, but maybe just a few hours ago. And perhaps the best example we have of that involves one of the most serious and tragic incidents in this war so far. As you probably know by now, in the early hours of this war, an Iranian girls' school was struck by a missile. Iranian officials estimate that around 175 people were killed, many of them children. And we've now had multiple reports claiming that the strike likely came from the United States, that our country likely killed those girls. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has been asked about those reports multiple times, and each time he has responded with some version of, we're investigating it. But Donald Trump has a bit of a different story.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 170?
No, in my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Okay, lots to unpack there, including Hegseth leering over Trump on Air Force One. That aside, Trump says Iran did it. Reports say that the U.S. did it. Trump's defense secretary won't go beyond we're investigating. But basically, just to kind of put a fine point on this, Trump is suggesting with no evidence that maybe it was actually Iran who bombed their own school with weapons Iran does not have, just to cut through it right there. I mean, yesterday, New York Times correspondent Sean McCreish offered the world a lesson in how to hold an erratic president accountable during a time of war. Here's what happened.
You just suggested that Iran somehow got its hands on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. But you're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane on Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this?
Because I just don't know enough about it. I think it's something that I was told is under investigation. But Tomahawks are used by others, as you know. Numerous other nations have Tomahawks. They buy them from us. But I will certainly, whatever the report shows, I'm willing to live with that report.
Every moment of that interaction makes it clear that Trump's claim is not based on anything other than his desire to deflect blame.
Babies connected to incubators die. People in hospitals die. And those are the first level effects. And then people begin to starve. And then you have refugee crises. People leave the cities looking for food. And then, yes, they move into other countries. In the region, in Europe, in the United States, you cause chaos and death, mass suffering and death when you do that. And we have done that. We have intentionally bombed civilian infrastructure in Iran.
I'm fixing to make some people mad right now. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be, for the statement I'm about to make, I'm going to be called a racist. And I will be called every name under the sun. But somebody needs to stand up and speak to the black church. When the largest African American Pentecostal denomination, when that leader stands up and said, I endorse that woman, he was saying, I endorse murder. I endorse homosexuality. I endorse lesbianism. I endorse transgenderism. I endorse every evil that hell could prosper or bring up to the right. That's wrong, folks. And the black church votes predominantly for the party that is anti-God. What's going on here?
What do you mean, praise be to Allah? What does that mean? Why are you sending this out on Easter morning? I mean, obviously it's designed to offend and degrade and defile. Got it. But is there something else going on here? One of the keys to this is the behavior of a woman called Paula White.
For angels are being released right now. Angels are being dispatched right now. Hamanda aka ata rakate de baka sanda ata ambo osa kata rite eke banda ata rikiti diashata. For angels have even been dispatched from Africa right now. Africa right now. Africa right now. From Africa right now. They're coming here. They're coming here. In the name of Jesus. From South America. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. They're coming here. From Africa. From South America. Angelic forces. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Angelic reinforcement. Pika hata anda ata. Ora bata rata anda eke eke manda rasata.
In a moment, we're going to speak to a man who studied her, who went to her church yesterday, called Nathan Abfell. Fascinating conversation with him, which we just finished, where he tries to understand who are these people encouraging the president of the United States to see himself as a millennialist figure, as part of the eschatology of part of the end time story. Who are these people who are encouraging the rebuilding of the third temple in Jerusalem, whatever that is? What is this? Is this Christianity? Is it something else? And he knows a lot about it, and it's a fascinating conversation that I hope that you will watch. But at the center of this is the most unlikely person of all, a ludicrous figure, someone who's so absurd on one level that it's impossible to take this person seriously. That would be Paula White, the president's spiritual advisor. And because she's so self-evidently not worth taking seriously, most people don't, and they just tune it right out. Who cares what she says? What does it have to do with the economy? Oil prices, GDP, reopening the strait? I don't know, maybe you should listen a little more carefully. So here's one example. This is something that Paula White said about the president right before this recent escalation during Holy Week at the White House, a gathering to which many American Protestant leaders, big ones, Franklin Graham included, were invited. And they gave a blessing to Donald Trump as he accelerated this war against the civilian population of Iran. Here's what she said about Donald Trump. Watch this.
You are here because of God and because of you. You are here because of God and because of you. Because of God and because of you. Because of God and because of you.
I never looked that way. The audience was massive and it was in front of me. I never have that particular graph. That was a graph on, as you all know now, that it's very, I think everyone knows it very well, but it showed the great numbers on illegal immigration. It was the lowest point we've ever had. And it was one that I use less than 20% of the time. It's always at the end of the speech, not at the beginning of the speech. And it's always on the left side, not the right side. And yet, for some reason, I called it. It's not on a teleprompter. I do things largely without a teleprompter, frankly, because it's hard to hold an audience if you're going to go for an hour and a half or 2 hours reading a script. And I just talked about it, and I moved to my right, turned sharply to my right, ping. And if I didn't do that, I'm not here with you. So, yeah, God has something to do with it. It's a miracle, and God had something to do with it. And maybe it's we want to save the world.
You are here because of God and because of you. And I just wanted to share this thought and then pray over President Trump. Jesus taught us so many lessons through his death, burial, and resurrection. He showed us great leadership. Great transformation requires great sacrifice. And Mr. President, no one has paid the price like you have paid the price. So true. It almost cost you your life. You were betrayed and arrested and falsely accused. It's a familiar pattern that our Lord and Savior showed us. But it didn't end there for him, and it didn't end there for you.
It's hard to believe that's real. That is so vile. It's such a sacrilege. Standing in front of American flags in the White House with some kind of beta evangelical leader nodding along as you liken the president of the United States to Jesus, the Christian Messiah, God in human form. How could you say something like that? How could the rest of us sit by and not protest when she said something like that? How could any Christian watch that and not feel revulsion? Well, because people didn't pay attention or they didn't think about it. Oh, it's just the praise that Trump demands. Fine. Not the first vain president, not the first vain leader, that's for certain. But to compare him or any president to Jesus has got to be a deal killer. That is the end. You cannot allow that in good faith. If you're a Christian, you have to say no to that. Doesn't matter whether you voted for Trump, campaigned for Trump across many states, defended him for 10 years, still like him, doesn't matter. You cannot compare a president, a secular president of the United States, or anybody, any human being to Jesus.
During each day of Holy Week, Christians remember the events of 2,000 years ago that forever changed the world. On Palm Sunday, Jesus entered Jerusalem as crowds welcomed him with praise, honoring him as king. They call me king now. Do you believe it?
What's your thoughts? Please be respectful with your comments. Also, please click the like, click the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel.
Listen, Genesis chapter 11, verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man in Africa. If you repeat this back, Genesis 14, verse 13, Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was Abraham, born in the city of a black man, called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham, Isaac was Jacob had 12 sons. For real, and these were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10. These were the children of Israel, according to Genesis chapter 10.